It's very encouraging to have a distinguished audience today, and I shall strive to provide all of you all with an overall overview of my thinking in general terms as far as governance is concerned. And I shall move on to the specific topic of new media, the challenges, future prospects, and the vision that we have formulated in order to attain the highest goals as far as this new medium is concerned. Let me at the outset provide you with a synopsis of the system of government, the methodology of governance which I envisage in a new modern Sri Lanka. Now, friends, if we are to prosper as a nation state, I fervently believe that prosperity is predicated upon fulfilling 4 essential prerequisites. First, I believe the necessity to establish decision-making structures that promote sound decision-making, which ultimately results in positive policy resultants. Then through that process, we can move on to identify the national priorities to be incorporated in the governance agenda. Thirdly, we should ensure the fast-tracked implementation, time-targeted policy implementation in terms of the policies that we have formulated. Lastly, it is most essential that we have a thorough monitoring and feedback on the various policy initiatives, its successes and failures. If we look at the various decision-making approaches that most world leaders have followed, if I may give you a few examples, how US President Franklin Delano Roosevelt brought out his country out of the Great Depression in the 1930s through the New Deal. John F. Kennedy through his New Frontier program. L.B. Johnson in initiating the Great Society program. Reaganomics in the 80s. One can come to a conclusion of a common thread that was prevalent in the decision-making process. The process was structured, it was rational. On most occasions, meritocracy gained primacy over other considerations. Specialists, generalists, experts, research-based think tanks provided the main policy inputs, and the policy resultants were a product of thorough analysis, information assimilation, scrupulous examination of facts and details. Now, why I'm talking about the processes is because my experience in the last decade in Sri Lankan governmental policy formulation is far different from the policy-making models that were adopted by the great leaders of the world. Ours is a system which is primarily ad hoc, personality and cult driven, disjointed, haphazard, and the consequences of such a process are policy resultants that are detrimental to the national interest of our country. So I think first and foremost, it is imperative that we establish a coherent decision-making structure when deciding on national priorities and when determining the national agenda. The state of the decision-making apparatus, I must say, has a direct correlation to the productiveness of the policy resultants. Now, having said that, if we look at the spectrum of policies that a government and a nation state enunciates, broadly it can be categorized into economic policy and social policy. Now, when we talk of economic policy, in the present day, I believe there is a structural crisis in the social strata. This structural crisis is a result of skewed, prejudicial economic policies that have favored one particular sector of society while ignoring the rest in total. I firmly believe in the model of shared prosperity and inclusive growth. As macroeconomic targets, we should aim at low inflation, minimal unemployment, high exports, low budget deficits, debt reduction, achieving high national disposable income, maximization of the utilization of scarce resources, high foreign direct investment. Now, these are some of the macroeconomic objectives that we have to achieve if Sri Lanka is to be economically great. How do we do this? Well, there are a number of models and theories which a variety of decision makers espouse. On the one hand, you have the Keynesian aggregate demand management model. And at the other extreme, you have the typical free market, Fred Hayek, Milton Friedman, neoliberal economic model. But I believe what's most suited to our country is a mixture of these two models which possess the major attributes in spurring economic growth. We are all cognizant of the pivotal role played by the small and medium-term entrepreneurs being the engine of economic growth. And we should strive a plethora of stimuli to ensure that we harness all resources, use and utilize policies, tools and instruments to ensure that we gain economic prosperity by supporting the SME sector. As a country, we need to have geographically targeted policy approaches. I'm reminded of the Thatcher policies in the 1980s, which was well known as the enterprise zone policy. A similar model was followed during the presidential tenure of my late father, the garment factory program, which distinguished and demarcated geographically the areas according to their economic circumstances. If we are to progress, if we are to develop and thrive in the international economy, we have to follow the export-based economic development model. And when it comes to growth, I fervently believe that the greatest value addition you achieve is from growth based on manufacturing. This has been proven to be the case during the 80s and 90s. And if you observe the progress made by the Asian tigers, the Asian economies, in the late 90s and early year 2000, manufacturing-based industrial development and economic growth has proven to be the most sustainable economic growth that one can achieve. If I may move on to the social policy aspect, we have to attain the highest standards, and through a strong and vibrant social policy in the health, education, agricultural, irrigation sectors, women's development, road infrastructure, transportation and highways, and most importantly, as far as the youth are concerned, we have to have innovative strategies, new approaches, so that we are able to achieve the highest standards in the policy programs in each of those specific areas. If I may come up with an example, in the youth sector, we are planning on establishing a youth charter with adequate parliamentary enactments which would give legal teeth. And we also propose the establishment of a national innovation fund, a national startup fund to support the talented, capable youth who are keen on starting up new ventures and who are instrumental in formulating innovative strategies in terms of business practices are concerned. We hope to provide them with the requisite seed capital and the funds and the resources that are required to promote innovation, to promote business startups, and thereby make the youth of our country partners in the country's progress and prosperity. So basically, I gave you that particular overview with a specific issue in mind. Today we are talking of new media, innovations, artificial intelligence, modern technological approaches for solving problems. All this gamut of ideas have to be translated into action. We are all too familiar with the sizable gap that exists between declaratory policy and action policy. We have seen many a grandiose program announced, given huge media publicity, but at the end of the day, the implementation of these ideas are very much stagnant, or they're implemented at tortoise pace. So I think in governance, formulation of the policy imperatives are vital. Such formulations should be rational, should be to the benefit of the nation's interest, and such policies have to be implemented through a time-targeted. Let me move on to the topic of the day. Now, prior to examining the issues related to new media, let's look at one of the series of issues, specifically economic issues, which we face right now, and how modern technology, innovative techniques and methods, new media, and various other innovative approaches can be utilized to ensure that we come out of these difficult circumstances. Well, friends, we all know that as a country, we are facing a huge debt trap. All of us are quick to point out, at most times, the per capita income levels in our country. But if one examines the per capita indebtedness, I believe approximately it amounts to around 575,000 per head to date. So as a country, we are embroiled in a debt trap. In addition, we are also faced with the challenges of a middle income trap. Third, a large portion of our country are struggling with the poverty trap. So with all these traps, one has to design and devise modern policies that are relevant, that are applicable, then that would cater to resolving these plethora of problems that we face as a country. When we define new media, it's popularly described as internet and various applications that run on platforms that connects multiple producers of content to multiple readers and viewers, such as Facebook. That's just a rough definition of new media. And one of its major virtues is the creation of platforms that connect suppliers of goods and services. And it also creates increased connectivity among stakeholders and people in society. If I may go back to the 80s, I remember during my school days, even at that time, most of the multinational enterprises had technological advancement as the main theme that guided their business operations. I remember the phrase Vorsprung durch Technik, a slogan that was adopted by the Audi car manufacturers. It meant progress through technology. And that's a phrase that is more relevant than ever in the present context today. So as a government, I believe in this new era, in this modern milieu, we should harness the potential of emerging technologies to improve and empower the lives of Sri Lankans. Through a focused, government-championed digital empowerment program, we can reach the highest levels of, quote, digital prosperity. International society is on the cusp of a revolution encompassing modern digital technologies, which overcomes time, distance and space, constraints and limitations. Therefore, friends, as a government, we should actively intervene to establish electronic payment platforms, promote e-commerce and e-governance, train small businesses to use new media, ensure 4G, 5G universal coverage, promote stability in the tax structure that has a direct relationship to inward investments, while recognizing the beneficial aspects of new media. One has to take recognition of possible detrimental impacts of the actions of certain outliers in society. We should be aware of propagation of false and defamatory information. We should strive to prevent hate speech. Certainly, as a national priority, we have to account for the national security imperatives. Having said that, I do not believe on the policy of collective punishment meted out to all for the actions of a few. Therefore, I believe we have to have a rapid takedown approach and appropriate, proportionate punishments meted out to those who break the law. And also, I think we have to pay attention to data protection instruments that have to be enacted in order to protect privacy of individuals in our country. Friends, let us for a moment look at the present state of affairs as far as Sri Lanka is concerned in the digital indices. When one examines these indices, it is quite apparent that we are lagging as a country, as a partner in the digital revolution that is taking place in the whole world. Let us for a moment look at the percentages of internet users in Malaysia and Thailand. For every 100 people, in Malaysia 80%, in Thailand 53% are internet users, whereas our numbers are quite low compared to those two countries. If we look at the figures in the ICT adoption pillar 3 of the Global Competitive Index, in most of those indicators, we lag far behind. When we look at smartphone ownership in our country, it is 54% among the 15 to 65-year-olds, which is a small number compared to the rest of the world. Just 37% of Sri Lankans make use of the internet. There are issues of limited skills, lack of digital literacy, low awareness, and at times relatively unaffordable services. Furthermore, if I may give you some more figures as far as contribution of ICT to Sri Lanka's exports, in 2016 it was a mere 5%. But when we look at Malaysia, Malaysia accounted for 1.1% of the world's share of telecommunications exports, while Thailand amounted to 1.7. While these figures depict a somewhat pessimistic situation as far as ICT issues are concerned, we can be encouraged by the achievements, the moderate achievements over the past 10 years. It has expanded by 300%, and we have reached US dollars 1.2 billion in export revenue. Up to now, we have employed 80,000 professionals and contributing 12% to Sri Lanka's services exports. So I think when one looks at these facts and figures, we are behind. However, there's potential. But this potential can only be realized by a interventionist, proactive government strategy which provides ample amount of inducements, encouragement, support in terms of infrastructure. The other day I was consulting with some experts about the possibility of establishing information communication technology learning centers that are of international standard and excellence throughout the country at a divisional secretary level, which would amount to 332 such centers. In addition, those ICT centers will also provide the opportunity for the people of Sri Lanka of all ages to obtain the requisite English literacy skills that are of international standards. So in each divisional secretary area, we will have a center of excellence that is of international standard, which will educate the people of Sri Lanka on both ICT and English literacy and linguistic skills. As a country, there are two more indicators which we have to be aware of in terms of encouraging business, investment, and promoting innovation. The World Bank's Doing Business Index ranks Sri Lanka 100th out of 190 countries. The comparative figure for Malaysia is 15. The ranking is 15. And for Thailand, it's 27. When one looks at performance on the innovation efficiency ratio measured by the Global Innovation Index, Sri Lanka ranks 88th out of 126 countries. So in conclusion, let me reiterate the fact that technology-led innovation is the engine of growth in building a new Sri Lanka. This major national objective will be pursued with great vigor, speed, and dedication. I invite you all to become partners, stakeholders, and active participants in this technology-led nation-building program. Together, we shall embark on this path-breaking journey, and we shall, with all our efforts and dedication, fulfill the aspirations of the modern-day youth of our motherland, a technologically empowered motherland, lead in the world in high-tech innovation, robotics, and artificial intelligence. Thank you.